It was just an ordinary afternoon. A 62-year-old veteran and his service dog only wanted a quiet meal in the corner of a diner. But within minutes, they were asked to leave. Under the indifferent eyes of everyone around, no one asked why. No one stood up. And then 48 hours later, 5 men in full dress uniform walked into that same diner. What happened in between? It all began with a simple shake of the head and ended with something no one saw coming. Welcome to NT, where everyday kindness becomes unforgettable. Let's begin this journey together. Morning in Hannaford, Missouri began the way it always did. The sun just rising over the eastern hills, dew clinging to the edges of the old wooden porch, and Raymond Tucker quietly tying his boots. He was 62 now, a retired Marine who had served 3 tours in the Middle East. His steps were slow and uneven, each one leaving a heavy sound on the weathered porch of the small apartment tucked behind an old gas station. But wherever he went, Raymond never walked alone. By his side was Major, a Belgian Malinois whose coat had faded with the years. Major's eyes were bright, not in a playful way, but in the way of someone who had seen too much to explain. He didn't bark, he didn't chase squirrels. He simply walked 1 pace behind Raymond's left heel, always calm, always alert. A friend, a comrade. The one soul Raymond trusted without question. Most people didn't understand that. To them, Major was just an old dog, wearing a vest that read, "Service Dog, Do Not Distract." But to Raymond, Major was the only thing that made him feel human again after the war. When his hands trembled without warning, Major would gently nudge his leg. When his breathing shortened in crowded places, Major would move forward and shield him. No commands, no prompting, just a rhythm built over years of sand, gunfire, and nights filled with silence in faraway bunkers. That's also why Raymond rarely spoke to strangers. He didn't need to. Major had heard it all, and sometimes understood more than words could carry. That afternoon, Raymond and Major stepped into Crescent Diner, an old family spot on the corner of Main Street. The tables were still oak from the 70s, the menus handwritten, and the apple pie always came out just before the lunch rush. Raymond had come here alone before, but today, with Major beside him, he chose the small table by the window. Quiet, out of the way, where Major could lie unnoticed under his feet. Raymond eased into the seat. Major curled up, resting his head between his paws. A young waitress brought a glass of water with a quick smile, until her eyes landed on Major's vest. The smile disappeared. Without a word, she turned and headed straight for the kitchen. Minutes later, Glenn Murchison, the manager with slick-back hair and a tight expression, walked up stiffly. "Sir, this establishment has a strict no-pets policy," he said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. Raymond stayed calm. "Raymond isn't a pet," he replied. "He's a certified service dog." He reached for the laminated certification in his wallet, but Glenn held up a hand, shaking his head. "Rules are rules. Some of our guests might not be comfortable." A woman at the next table, wearing large sunglasses and glittering bracelets, muttered to her friend, "Veteran or not, a dog's still a dog." The air around them tightened. Ice avoided contact. Ice stirred in half-finished glasses. Raymond looked down at Major, who hadn't moved a muscle, still lying in his post, as if shielding him from the judgment in the room. He didn't speak again, but sometimes silence speaks louder than protest ever could. Raymond said nothing. He simply stood up and left the diner. The glass door swung shut behind him, and the little bell above it jingled, somehow colder than it had earlier that day. He crossed the street quietly, Major walking beside him in perfect rhythm, not fast, not slow, just steady enough to keep in sync with his handler's gait. They found an old wooden bench in the park just across the way. No one noticed them. People strolled by, kids played in the distance, and Raymond sat down, reaching into his jacket pocket to pull out half of a tuna sandwich he'd wrapped that morning. He tore it in two and handed the larger half to Major. "Not the salmon I promised," he muttered. but it'll have to do today. Major didn't lunge or gobble. He ate slowly, eyes flicking up every so often to check that Raymond's breathing was still calm. When the meal was finished, Raymond reached into his wallet and carefully slid out a worn photo sealed in plastic. The colors were fading, but the moment was frozen in perfect clarity. A younger Raymond on a stretcher, head wrapped in gauze, uniform soaked in blood. And beside him, a much younger Major, his coat still dark, eyes fierce, body standing guard over his fallen partner. The tag on Major's vest read Sierra Company, Afghanistan. No one in the diner had seen that photo. No one had even thought to ask. Raymond traced a finger across the image and whispered, "Kicked out again, huh?" Major gently laid his head on Raymond's knee, not moving, not making a sound, just a gesture. Raymond knew well from cold nights in distant war zones. It wasn't comfort, it was presence, and sometimes that was enough. A young mother passed by, tugging her child along as she whispered, "Don't get too close to strange men or big dogs." Raymond heard it, but he didn't flinch. He was used to being looked at like a story no one wanted to hear. The next day at lunch, Crescent Diner looked the same as always. People ordered fried catfish, the coffee was strong, and country music hummed softly through the speakers. But that calm was about to shift. Not with shouting or drama, but through quiet presence. The door opened, and 5 Marines in full dress uniform stepped inside. Their formation was tight, their faces solemn. Conversation stopped. A few heads turned. Someone in the back whispered, recognizing the Sierra Company insignia. The lead Marine walked up to the front counter. His face was sun-worn, eyes focused. He spoke clearly. "Good afternoon, my name is Elijah Ford, Captain U.S. Marine Corps, Sierra Special Operations Unit. We're not here to eat. We're here because of something that happened in this diner yesterday." From behind the counter, manager Glenn Murchison appeared, a bit unsure. "Yes, sir, I'm the manager. Can I help you?" Captain Ford nodded politely but didn't break eye contact. "Yesterday, a veteran named Raymond Tucker was denied service here. We learned about it through a video shared in the Missouri Veterans Network. The dog at his side, Major, is Sergeant Major in our unit. And Raymond is the man who saved my life and the lives of 3 others in Kandahar." Glenn stammered. I didn't know. We were just following policy. No one told me who he was." "You don't need to know someone's biography to treat them with basic decency," Ford replied, his tone steady but unshakable. "But once you do know, silence is no longer innocent." He placed a framed photo on the counter. It was the same image Raymond had pulled from his wallet, the stretcher, the sand, the dog standing guard. Below it, a single word was engraved. "Brother." No one spoke. A few diners lowered their eyes. The young waitress quietly wiped her table, hands trembling. That afternoon, the sun slanted low through the trees on 8th Street. Raymond and Major were back on their usual bench, as if nothing had changed. But Raymond's mind replayed the scene from earlier. The uniforms, the faces of the men he once fought beside, and the photo he had once kept to himself, now placed in full view for the whole town to see. He had no idea what had taken place in the diner after he left, until Haley Monroe, the young waitress from that day, appeared at the edge of the park path. In her hands was a small takeout box, tied with a piece of string. Inside, fried catfish, a slice of apple pie, and a folded note tucked beneath the ribbon. She approached slowly, head slightly bowed. "I don't know if you'll want this, but we were wrong, and this is just a small way to try and make it right." Raymond accepted the box without a word. His hands didn't shake. He simply looked at the note, carefully written, no smudges. "We were wrong. Please let us start again." There was no anger in his eyes, no obvious forgiveness either, just the quiet understanding of a man who had lost too much to hold grudges over small things. Mistakes, he had learned, weren't always worth punishing. Sometimes they were just noted. After Haley turned and walked away, Raymond glanced down at Major. "Well, buddy," he said softly, "they're trying. You think we should give them another shot?" Major didn't bark. He just lifted his tail and wagged once, a soldier's way of agreeing to a ceasefire. 1 week after that quiet afternoon, Crescent Diner changed. A new sign hung in the front window. "We proudly welcome all veterans and their service companions." Just below the diner's front window, they mounted a large display frame filled with black and white and color photos of military working dogs through the years, from World War II to Vietnam to Iraq. And in the center, a full-color photo of Major, geared up in tactical vest, standing beside Raymond in the red dust fields of Afghanistan. Inside the diner, the small window-side table, once the place where Raymond had been turned away, now held a small ceramic vase with an American flag and a wooden plaque engraved with the words, "Raymond and Major Sierra Company, never forgotten." No ads were needed. Word traveled through Hannaford on its own. Thank you letters began arriving at the diner, most of them written by children from Liberty Oak Elementary. On a quiet Saturday morning, a group of students came to visit Raymond in person. One shy boy raised his hand. "Does your dog understand when people say thank you, sir?" Raymond knelt down, even though his knees still ached when he moved. He gently patted Major's head and gave a soft smile. "He doesn't need words. He just needs to be around people who remember what he's done. That's enough." A few days later, word got around that Glenn Murchison had stepped down from his role as manager. On his old desk, he left a handwritten note addressed to the diner's owner. "I learned something the law books never taught me. Respect doesn't come from rules. It comes from how we choose to see other people." Raymond and Major returned every Thursday. Quietly, without fuss. Major was older now, slower to stand, but his eyes never strayed from Raymond. Whether in a war zone or in a small-town diner, he was still standing guard. Hannaford, Missouri. Early Sunday morning, the air just beginning to turn crisp. "Dear Davis, I'm not sure if you remember what I promised you on that stretcher, back when Major was just a rookie, and I was down to one good boot. We said whoever made it home had to live enough for both of us. Well, these past few days, I think I finally did that. It started like any other day, just me and Major, heading to a little diner near home. No yelling, no fights, just the kind of looks, the kind that remind you how the world keeps moving on without you, the kind of silence that says you don't belong here anymore." But then, some men, wearing uniforms like ours, walked in, not to retaliate, but to remind people that some things shouldn't be forgotten, even when no one talks about them. A young waitress brought over a box of food with a handwritten note. Just a few words, but I know it took everything she had to write them. And Major, as always, didn't say a word, just wagged his tail once, like he was signaling that things were okay. "Davis, here's what I've come to believe. Not everyone will understand what we've lived through, but if we live long enough and live right, even our silence will eventually be heard. Respect doesn't come from medals or uniforms. It comes from how someone chooses to treat another person, especially when no one's watching. I think you'd be proud if you saw Major today. He's still here, still watching, still waiting for the call you left behind in that dark night outside Ramah. If you believe that a loyal dog and a forgotten veteran deserve to be heard, comment the word heard below. And if this story moved you, please share it with someone who you know would understand. This is Into Amazing Stories, where we bring to life the stories of justice, gratitude, and the memories we must never let fade. Hit subscribe and stick around, because sometimes just one moment of listening can change the way we see everything.